Welcome to Mind Body Monday, and thank you all for joining me in today's topic, which is going to be a deeper dive into the topic of gluten sensitivity. We're going to be learning about what is gluten and where is it found. Why are so many people going gluten-free? What's behind this trend? Possible warning signs of gluten sensitivity. And should you consider going on a gluten-free diet? If you are, I'm going to share with you two of the common mistakes people make when they're trying to do that. Towards the end, I'm going to share three of my favorite gluten-free grains that have amazing healing properties. And then I'm going to open for a quick Q&A towards the end of our session today. So I always like to start Mind Body Monday with a story from my clinic. And this one was about recently I saw a 52-year-old woman who was suffering from many digestive disorders and symptoms: bloating, gas, constipation, diarrhea, etc. And she had these symptoms before she came to see me. And the good news is she had been tested for celiac disease, which I'm going to cover shortly. And even better news is that she was negative. So she erroneously thought that she could continue to eat gluten. And indeed, her symptoms just became worse. You can imagine she felt confused, uncertain as to what to do, and hence she picked up the phone and came to the clinic. So based on a careful case history and reviewing of blood and lab work, I did put her onto a healthy gluten-free program, and she began to heal and the gastric symptoms began to clear up. I'm just curious, for those of you who have tried gluten-free or are conscious of gluten-free products when you shop, go ahead, just type in the chat. I'm just curious to know who's here, if you've had any experience with gluten-free, or if you have considered doing that. And while you're typing in the chat, for those of you who are new, my name is Avraham Gundle. I'm the founder and director for the Center for Integrated Medicine. And over the last 30 years in my private practice, I've been privileged to help many people overcome, heal, or go into remission from a whole host of chronic health conditions, be it digestive disorders, anxiety, mood disorders, skin condition, autoimmune conditions, etc., to name a few. Let's kick off with a little bit of research. Before I do that, I just want to take a peek at the chat. So if you see me looking to the side, it's because I've got two screens going here. So someone's written, not so healthy always, okay. Being aware of it. Oh, Shelley, lovely to see you here. We are gluten-free, someone says. And my sister and granddaughter are celiac. Okay. My daughter was just diagnosed with celiac, says Abigail, you're in the right place. Abigail and Robin are very little gluten, only some spelt bread occasionally. Okay, super. So there is awareness, and there's going to be greater awareness after today's session. And today's session is really skimming the iceberg, an important skim though, because I've taken a deep dive into this topic, and I understand why my patients and the public in general are quite confused. So let's just kick off with some research. About 18 million Americans have a gluten sensitivity. This number is relevant because this number is 6 times more than those people who are diagnosed with celiac disease. In other words, those who have been diagnosed with celiac disease are a very small amount of the population. 6 times more figure of those with gluten sensitivity. And hence, they mistakenly think that if they're not celiac disease diagnosed, then they can continue to eat gluten. So let's just jump in. What is celiac disease? So celiac disease is actually an autoimmune disease. Autoimmune means the body attacks itself, where the immune system attacks specifically the small intestinal villi. And I'm going to show you a picture of that in just a few moments. and it wears these little finger-like projections down. And this is the surface where the body digests nutrients, and those nutrients then go into our bloodstream. And if we don't have these villi, these finger-like projections, then the nutrients are poorly absorbed, and this will then trigger a whole host of other health crises and possibly even other autoimmune diseases as well. Now, these villi provide an incredible benefit to the body. They allow for a huge surface area for nutrients to be absorbed into your bloodstream. In fact, the surface area inside our intestine is approximately the size of a football field. It's a huge surface area. I'm just going to pause for a minute because I do want to share with you an interesting picture, because I've said words, and unless you understand what I'm talking about in a pictorial sense, it's difficult to relate. So on your screen, the top picture is a graphical representation of a section from a small intestine. This little black square in the middle is from where these two other pictures, left and right, are taken. So on the left side, you have a picture of a normal gut. This is from the small intestine, and these little finger-like projections are called villi, V-I-L-L-I, for those Scrabble pundits. And even though they are so tiny, but together they create an enormous surface area, as I said, the size of a football field, in order for our nutrients from the foods we eat to be digested and absorbed into our bloodstream, and from there into our cells of our body to make us healthy and strong. However, in the case of celiac disease or even gluten sensitivity, these villi become eroded, become destroyed through attack by the body's immune system. And on the left picture, you'll see really a rather flat looking small intestine section. So that means digestion and absorption of nutrients is majorly impaired because the surface area has dropped, but also these little villi help with digestion. So this is a picture on the right side of a celiac disease section of the small intestine. And as you can see, it is very different to the healthy picture on the left. So this gives you some insight into why staying away from gluten, and I'm going to get to in a minute, why people who are also gluten sensitive and not only celiac disease may be recommended to get off gluten. So, by the way, someone who is diagnosed with gluten, with celiac disease, must stay off gluten for the rest of their life. So what is gluten and where is it found? Gluten, first of all, is a protein found in many grains, wheat, barley, possibly oats because of cross-contamination, rye, and spelt. Now, what about the rest of us that are not gluten sensitive necessarily, or certainly not celiac disease? Why are people going gluten-free, and why is it so trendy? So I think there are really three possible reasons for this. Part of it is that the diet has become highly processed, fast food orientated diets more than ever before. It's food that is engineered with tremendous wisdom to stimulate the brain, just like actually a lot of food is engineered to stimulate the brain, like the brain's opioid receptors. So people can get a high on eating, and this is part of the design of processed foods, where they trigger these feel-good factors in the brain and have major negative consequences on the body. But people are looking for quick fixes, be it weight loss, overcoming fatigue, and clearing skin. And going off gluten maybe a quick pathway to getting those results. And I said maybe. The second reason is gluten goes through a tremendous amount of processing, which makes it even harder for the body to digest, especially if someone has a weak digestive system or food allergies and sensitivities. The third possible reason why it's trendy to get off gluten is because there's simply greater awareness. As already from our chat, you can see that just the people that are here on our live session are writing in how much experience they've had with gluten-free. But really, there are better diagnostic tools, lab tests, and it's easier to diagnose celiac disease specifically. And I'm going to get into another modified condition where a person may want to get off gluten as well. So the question is really, a lot of my patients ask me whether gluten sensitivity means they also have an autoimmune condition. And that's a good question. Now, I want you to see an autoimmune or really autoimmune disease as a spectrum. And all the way on the end of that spectrum is the extreme case of celiac disease, which is a life-threatening condition if left undiagnosed or untreated. And anywhere along that line could be other aspects of an autoimmune disease which may not necessarily been picked up, because there is another, I'm going to say, related condition called non-celiac gluten sensitivity. In fact, just before going live tonight, I reached out to a colleague of mine, one of the local pediatricians in my neighborhood. We have ongoing discussion and cross-pollinate our patients. And I asked him what tests does he currently run for non-celiac gluten sensitivity. And he just said there are none. And that's true, there are none. For celiac disease, there are a few tests, but again, that is quite complex. And I'm going to share with you that now. But let's just talk about gluten sensitivity for a moment. Gluten sensitivity means that it's a condition where people cannot tolerate gluten very well, and they experience symptoms similar to celiac disease, but they don't have the same antibodies or intestinal damage as in full-blown celiac disease. So I say to my patients that if you've been suffering from gluten-related symptoms, but you've tested negative to celiac disease, and you have symptoms like bloating, gas, constipation, diarrhea, pain, inflammation, and the latest research also identifies different proteins within the gluten molecule that can cross the blood-brain barrier and even trigger autism-related conditions. It can cross the placenta and affect the unborn, and it can cause into the spine and also cause more central nervous system conditions. So it's very important, and I tell this to my patients, to listen to your body and pay attention to a relationship between what you're eating and what you're feeling. Feeling means not only physical discomfort in your body, pain, fatigue, brain fog, blurry vision, poor memory, but also your mood. There's a relationship between how you feel and your mood. And all of this, I believe, is an early warning that your body is talking to you. And part of Mind Body Monday is learning to listen to your body and honor some of the callings and take positive action. Because if a person ignores these symptoms, almost like ignoring the yellow light or orange light on your dashboard of your car, the engine may overheat and you may have a major problem on your hands. So too with your body. The body dialogues with us through pain, through discomfort, through fatigue, all sorts of things like that. And we need to pay attention to it. Because autoimmune diseases don't just appear out of nowhere. Someone doesn't wake up in the morning with an autoimmune disease. Generally speaking, it's a slow, gradual process of the body being unable to defend and stand up for itself. So another example of some of the autoimmune conditions on the spectrum would be thyroiditis, Hashimoto's, thyroid conditions, which I've seen very often are related to gluten sensitivity. So the best thing is to get yourself a diagnosis, and even better, find a functional integrated medical practitioner that's trained and qualified to help you decipher the language of your body, to figure out what's going on and get you fast tracking your health. In fact, there was a PubMed study where researchers found that gluten was one of the main culprits behind this thyroid condition called Hashimoto's. So if someone does have a metabolic issue related to thyroid, that is certainly one reason to consider going gluten-free. So another question my patients ask me is, how can they test for gluten sensitivity? Now, this is, on the one hand, relatively straightforward. On another hand, extremely complicated, because there is a blood test for gliadin, which is one particular protein component of gluten. Hang in there. But there are at least 4 or more protein components of this gliadin molecule: alpha, beta, gamma, omega, as an example of some of them. The problem with the gliadin test is that it's only testing alpha gliadin, which means that if you have a negative alpha gliadin antibody test, you can still have a positive response to one of the others that no one has tested and no one knows about. So this can give the impression that a person is not gluten sensitive when they really, really are. In fact, additional research shows that there are 24 different qualities in wheat that can cause reactivity. And the testing only will test 1 or 2 of these different aspects. So it's really a shot in the dark. So therefore, more comprehensive lab tests would be needed to really get a baseline or eliminate or give you leverage to eliminate gluten from one's diet. So here's the key takeaway at this part so far, is that a proper diagnosis is really important to distinguish between celiac disease, a wheat allergy, or a gluten sensitivity, because it's the management of how the patient is treated is very different depending on these diagnoses. So when my patients ask me what to do, I always send them to get lab testing first, even though there is inadequacy, as I've said, just to get some sort of baseline. So if you have undiagnosed digestive problems or difficulty losing weight or fatigue, and you don't have celiacs, then you may want to consider going on to a gluten-free diet. But before you do, it's always first best to check with your doctor or a healthcare practitioner, nutritionist, or functional doctor. And to do it right, you want to avoid making the following 2 very common mistakes. So the first common mistake is gluten-free does not necessarily mean you're eating healthy. For example, corn chips are gluten-free, but these are often high in processed refined oils, high in sugar, extremely high in sodium, low in nutrients, and all of these factors are known to cause inflammation in the body, even though they are delicious because they're loaded with MSG and other brain-stimulating chemicals. They will over time cause inflammation to the body. In fact, I jokingly tell my patients the worst place to shop for gluten-free and for health foods is the health food store. This is because when people walk into a health food store, they have been primed in their mind to think that everything in this health food store is healthy. Their guard is down and they just see gluten-free, don't necessarily read labels like they should do, and make that mistake. So the first thing to do is eat healthy gluten-free foods, and I'm going to share 3 of mine towards the end. The other point relating to that is really read labels. The shorter the ingredient list, the easier to pronounce, the better off you are. The second common mistake people make with going gluten-free is don't Don't quit too soon. A few weeks or even a mere month of going gluten-free won't, for many people, make enough of a difference. For example, the inflammatory effects of gluten were researched to show up for at least 6 months in people tested with autoimmune thyroid problems. And I've found that gut problems like leaky gut can often take over a year to heal once gluten is removed from the diet. So the key takeaway to avoid in this mistake is, if you're going to go gluten-free, really do some research on the healthiest ways to do that and give it time to work so your body can anti-inflame and heal itself. And even though you may notice some relatively immediate benefits, the real benefits will take a little bit of time to kick in. So I want to share with you my 3 favorite gluten-free grains and why. The first is quinoa. Some people pronounce it quinoa. And it definitely is one of my favorite grains. It comes in different colors. There's red, there's brown, there's the more white, bland, neutral color. And they all have different flavors and textures. This grain, is very easy to digest. It's easy to make. It's clean. It's rich in magnesium and high in antioxidants. My second favorite gluten-free grain is buckwheat. In fact, just last week, I sprouted buckwheat and I dehydrated it and added it as a crunchy additive to soups and salads. More on that in another mind body maybe. So, but buckwheat is, even though it's got wheat in the name, it's got nothing to do with wheat in terms of its gluten-containing properties. It has none. And according to PubMed research, buckwheat is very high in 2 specific in antioxidants in general, but 2 specific ones, and that's called rutin and quercetin. Now, according to some studies, rutin may actually help to improve symptoms of Alzheimer's disease, and quercetin has been shown to lower inflammation and oxidative stress. So what's oxidative stress? It's basically a breakdown of body tissues, which can lead to fatigue, memory loss, brain fog, digestive issues. So eating foods high in quercetin like quinoa will prevent all this and help heal your body. My third favorite gluten-free grain is teff, T-E-F-F. And this one is high in protein. It can leave you feeling delightfully and comfortably full after eating it. It reduces food craving and boosts metabolism and has some other many benefits. So just before, I'd like to end with my weekly challenge, and I'll take a couple of questions. If you've been undiagnosed with a digestive problem, or you have difficulty losing weight or fatigue, and you don't have celiac disease, then the invitation, and I really like to phrase it or frame it as a divine experiment, is consider going gluten-free and do some research before the smartest ways to do it, and give yourself some time to allow your body to heal. With some of my patients, even with as little as 10 days or 2 weeks, if there's body pain or fatigue, it can lift quite remarkably. The deeper healing will need a little bit more time, as I've said. So thanks again for joining me on Mind Body Monday, and I look forward to seeing you next week. And remember, Mind Body Monday is where self-care is the heart of healthcare. All you really need to do is take one small step to advance your health in mind, body, and spirit. Hope to see you next week.